Gotta make the run out to Dunks later.
There you go.
Grab
Get out
myself
to
a
the
nice cup of
Dunks.
coffee.
I love Dunkin' Donuts coffee. It's really good.
There's something about it that it's like a drug. You know what I mean? Is you have it and it's really good. You just get addicted to it. It's like you can go to wherever and get like really nice cups of coffee that are all, brewed and whatever, but it's like some reason you're like, I haven't had a cup of Dunks in a while.
I think it's all the sugar in the air surrounding where the coffee's made. All that powdered sugar just gets up into the air and then gets into the coffee canister and grounds, and then boom.
Yeah,
it's sugar free.
Yeah, exactly. It could be.
It's got an extra something to it though, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. Maybe a little less now because I don't know how many of the places actually make the donuts still in house. It's more just shipping them in to all the different places, but yeah.
That's a great question. We'll have to, maybe when you go to Dunks, you can find out. Do some recon.
Yeah, I'll have to. They are local. They are a local company, technically.
Just one thing before we start. What made you go into scheduling?
Actually, I kind of backed into scheduling. It was so I was a PM at the time, and the head of ops at the company I was at was deciding on a position that they wanted to make where they wanted to combine someone who could help out and facilitate the lean sessions and pull planning sessions and last planner on jobs. And I happened to be the person who had the most experience within the company on kind of our larger jobs. And so they kind of asked me, they said, hey, do you want to do this? But also we're looking for someone to start up the scheduling department internally. Are you interested? And so that kind of came along with the gig, so to speak. So that's kind of how I backed myself into scheduling. It wasn't a conscious like, oh, I want to go into scheduling. It was kind of a, I'm going to take on more of a role in the company to help facilitate and grow lean. And it's also going to be, building up the scheduling department and capabilities in-house. So I had the opportunity to kind of build some SOPs that encompassed everything together. So that's kind of how I ended up getting there. So there was no formal training or anything like that. I just kind of backed my way into it. Said, yeah, sure, we'll do this.
Yeah, check that out, listeners. All the people listening. Lean was so powerfully important to George that they said, you can do this if you also do scheduling and start a scheduling group. I think that is the first of its kind, George.
It could be. Yeah. No, it's, I know most people look at it and they said, okay, you did scheduling and lean. So it's kind of like a walking oxymoron. Excuse me. But, yeah, no, it might be the first of the kind, but that's kind of what it happened is, I had experience just on the jobs, at least with scheduling and a little bit of dabbling around in P6. But once that kind of happened, I said, okay, well, I need to kind of switch gears here and really research and dive into what it takes to actually be a scheduling department and scheduler. And so, yeah, like I said, that always kind of came for me in my brain, at least secondary. But once the department got up and running, it was obviously one of the things that the first and foremost that we would handle. But yeah, always tried to get some of the lean into how we actually ran and scheduled and planned on our jobs anyways. So
I think the other thing that people need to know is that you're trained as an architect. And so
I am.
That's like even more like anti-scheduling than anything else, I think. Even more so than all the lean experience that you have and what you were doing.
Yeah, no, it is my I went to college for architecture, so I ended up going through that, and I had an internship while I was at school, and it was with a CM firm who was looking for architects because specifically they were were kind of up and coming with their VDC and BIM capabilities, and really at the time the only people who knew Revit were architecture students and design people. So they were like, we need people who are going to be able to use it. And so I did an internship there, and that kind of did it for me. That sealed the deal. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going back into architecture. I'm going to finish my degree and I'm going into CM. So, yeah. So I went from the dark side to the dark side and then over to the dark side of scheduling. That's great.
And then you went to the bright side of software.
Yeah.
Welcome to the EBFC Show, the easier, better for construction podcast. I'm your host, Felipe, Engineer Manriquez. This show is all about the business of construction. Today's episode is sponsored by
Bosch Refine My Site is a cloud-based construction collaboration platform that applies lean principles to enable your entire team to plan, communicate, and execute in real time. It's the digital tool that works in tandem with your last planner system process and puts it all together in one simple, collaborative ecosystem. This easy-to-use platform is available in English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and can be used on desktops, tablets, and mobile devices. According to Spencer Easton, scheduling manager at Oakland Construction,
Refine My Site, in my opinion, is the best, leanest tool on the market for last planners.
here's what our users have to say. We've looked at 3 other digital scheduling platforms and none compare to the straightforward approach Refine My Site takes. From milestone planning all the way down to daily tasks, this program gives every general contractor and their trade partners meaningful collaboration, accountability, and KPIs. Register today to try Refine My Site for free for 60 days.
Today's show is also sponsored by the Lean Construction Institute. LCI is working to lead the building industry in transforming its practices and culture. Its vision is to create a healthy and thriving industry that delivers outstanding project outcomes every time for everyone. Check the show notes for more information. Now, to the show. Welcome to the show, George Hunt. George, you and I became friends first on LinkedIn, and then #IRL. In real life, ladies and gentlemen. And I've had the honor of being on, was it show 1? What show was it of your podcast?
It is show 1, yeah. So it was part 1 of show 1, yeah.
Part 1, show 1.
Yep, I think first guest actually out of the gate too. So
That's
there was 3 guests on that episode, and yeah, you were first guest out of the gate. So.
And we'll put a link to that show in the show notes so that you can listen to George's masterful interviewing skills of me on that show. That was a lot of fun, George. And we definitely didn't plan enough time for all the conversation we had to do. So we had to have you come back on to our show, the EBFC show. Listeners, pay attention, as you always do. George has some nuggets and some wisdom. He has a non-traditional path, as you heard. But he's got a lot of things to offer, and I think you're going to learn something new. I'm expecting quite a few surprises here, George. And I know you won't disappoint.
Okay. No, I will not disappoint. I will do everything I can. I'm not a person who likes to disappoint. So
he won't disappoint. And he's already leveled up because he has one of the greatest podcast microphones that there is. It's exactly the same one that I have.
Exactly. Yep. Yep, we just established that we pretty much have the same exact setup all the way down to the webcam as well. So
yes,
it's good.
Same webcam. It's a small world. So with that, George, please go ahead and introduce yourselves and spare no details. I'll interrupt you if you go too far back into your childhood.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to say, so on a day in October, but no, yeah, so let's see, where to start. So
happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That was good. So that was a nice little birthday. I celebrated the weekend on while we were out there at LCI. So it was nice to roll it into it. But yeah, so my background. So as we kind of talked about is, I was trained as an architect, went to design school, and then I came out into the CM world and held a number of different positions, from starting out in VDC and BIM and modeling and coordination, and then kind of shifted to being out in the field for a few years as an assistant super, and then, shifted into the office as an assistant PM. And then, as we were just talking about, I kind of took up the position at the company I was at to stand up the kind of internal scheduling department and also take over as lean champion within the company. And so that's kind of what I was doing for the last 3 or 4 years before I made the jump to where I am now at TouchPlan. So I head up our sales engineering team here, which is new within the company too, is TouchPlan's experiencing a lot of growth. So, they've been going out and grabbing some new great talent and kind of building up the team we have here to help build a better offering for, clients and customers and helping them solve the problems that they have. So I'm here now, and that's kind of what I do. I get to talk to customers on a daily basis and help them solve their problems, which is a huge passion of mine. So it's working out great.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And George, when you were an assistant superintendent, I'm curious, what was your favorite trade? And tell us a story about why that trade crept its way into being special to you.
So I think it ended up being the electrician. And on a specific job that I was on, we were renovating one of the old mills here in New England, which in New England we have a lot of. It was an old, textile mill right on a river, very stereotypical. But they bought it and they were redoing it into some condos and apartments. And so a bunch of different buildings. And so it was pretty complex. And it was actually the first project that I had jumped on as an assistant superintendent. So out in the field, I'm trying to do the BIM coordination and all that, as well as being the assistant superintendent. And the electrical foreman, I think, just right off the start was super friendly and helpful. I mean, is he was participating in all the coordination meetings and just, really nice guy. And not that everybody else wasn't, but, he just was extremely friendly. And then I think I remembered is on the job on a regular basis within the summer is, they would end up having the scrap copper from all the cuts of the wire and things like that. And, people do lots of different things with it. But what he would end up doing is they would end up going and bringing it to the scrapyard, getting money for it, and he would save it. And then at the end of the week for the summer is he would buy stuff and have a barbecue for all the guys on the job site. And so we would end up pitching in, and it was kind of what he did almost every job he was at. And so all the scrap copper and things like that, the plumbers ended up joining in and kind of taking theirs, and they would kind of go and, turn the scrap copper in, bring the money, and then they'd all kind of buy stuff. And so on a pretty much, weekly, if not bi-weekly basis, we would have a cookout on a Friday, and we'd all kind of hang out and, have a few laughs, eat some food during the lunch break, and then go back to work. And so, I think the way how friendly he was and helpful to me, but then also just seeing how he interacted with everybody on the job site, I think it was one of those things where I was kind of like, yeah, okay, the perception of construction workers out in the field of being rough and gruff and everyone's yelling at each other and throwing hard hats across the room, which does happen, but that's not how it always is. It's kind of nice to know that people out there are still nice and humans and can actually have civil conversations with each other. So yeah,
and
I think that's kind of how it
some
went.
beautiful chow too.
Yeah, no, it was good because we were lucky enough where there was a local butcher shop right down the road. And so they would go to the butcher shop, get a bunch of meat and stuff for people. And so, yeah, it was really cool. So I think that's what ended up happening and why I ended up, we'll say, gravitating towards the electrician on that job. But to be honest with you, is all the trades on that job. And when it came to the foreman, they were definitely top notch. Some of the best that I've worked with, throughout my career. So
That's an incredible story. It's a testament to the men and women making construction happen. Like George said, there are good people out there. Definitely creating some culture. That's a very good way to create a positive and healthy culture that does honor and respect people. George, thank you for sharing that nugget. There's the first surprise. You've already checked that box for me. And everything else that we talk about now is just going to be bonus material.
Awesome.
So I wanted to also ask you, you mentioned on scheduling that you were self-trained as a young assistant manager and then PM. You were about at the PM area in your career when you were shifting into some of those scheduling things, or where were you in your career roughly?
Yeah. Yep. I was right about at the project management level. So it was kind of a discussion of, do I take this position on as kind of the next step and to kind of build it up, or do I want to stay on the project management track and kind of, I end up getting the promotion to PM, and kind of start running my own project. So that was kind of the decision where I was at.
Okay. And yeah, you chose, and then you did actually get, I see some alphabet behind your name. So I know that you've actually trained. You tell people what you earned there and what's that about? And would you recommend it to other people?
Yeah. So the PSP certification, so it's through ACE, so AACE, the Association of Cost Engineers. And so I would definitely recommend it to people if you're looking to, do some formal training and get some credentials behind it. I mean, I think credentials aren't for everyone, and some people, tend to put more weight on them than others. I think when I was doing it is, like I said, I didn't really have any formal training or any sort of background where I was like, okay, this is specifically on the scheduling and planning front. And so I kind of went through and did a bunch of research, and that was one of them that I came across that said, okay, this seems like there's a good amount of people who have it from a reputable organization. And so I went through and did the test. I didn't end up doing any sort of classes beforehand, but I brought up the manual and found the whole knowledge base that you needed to know, and did a little bit of studying and took the test to get the certification. So, I mean, I definitely recommend it for those who are looking for different certifications to have. But I also would say that it's not, in my eyes at least, it's not something that's necessary to say that, you know scheduling or can do scheduling and planning. I think it's one of those things where I feel like it's kind of a toss-up on whether or not people put stock into the certifications or not. So yeah, it's kind of a personal preference, but it's something if you're into them that I would look into.
Is that something that you'd recommend people get their employer to reimburse, or is that something that, as part of your personal professional development, that you'd recommend people take on those costs themselves?
So I would say try to get your employer to reimburse you on it. And, and from the standpoint that I think the certifications, for me at least, that's more of the client facing, front facing kind of a thing that you can put on the resume, that when they go and put the job RFPs out and responses, that they can put that on. Oh, they're on our team. Here's a bunch of the acronyms and certifications they have. Whereas I think, you can go through and learn everything there is behind the certification on your own. So to me, I feel like the knowledge and the learning that you get from, the journey to get that certification is more for you, and the actual credential itself is more for the company, so to speak. So I would say try and get your company to pay for it. But, if you're out there and you're not currently at a company and you think that it's something that would get you the next step and be able to get you that position, then, maybe it's something worth investing in. But I think it's situational, but yeah.
Perfect answer, George. Again, another nugget of wisdom for all the people. The audience here in the EBFC show, definitely we would classify as a learning community for sure. And on that note, George, I wanted to ask you some questions about learning and capability development. You've mentioned a lot of different areas. You've done some cool internships. You've worked in different roles inside the industry. What do you offer, or what do you want to share with people about the importance of learning and capability development?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I want to share is that, my journey with lean construction it definitely started on the surface with Last Planner and being like, okay, this is a planning tool. We're doing this in planning. And I think the more that I've got into it and researched and heard from people in the industry and just figuring out really what lean and lean construction is the more you start to realize that it's not, the planning aspect of it and the coordination, all that, I don't want to call it the surface stuff, but that's kind of the results. That's what you get out of it, and that's kind of what you're doing with it. But at the core of it, it is about learning and building our own capability, right? So the Last Planner and all the cycles of learning and feedback is meant to make us better at planning and make us better at scheduling and talking to each other, so that we can get better results on our jobs. And so that's kind of at the core of it. And I think that too often we're taking that approach that this is a tool, this is what we're looking at. And I think we're definitely on a trend now with a lot of us in the industry who are trying to push for that core belief that we're trying to build the capability of people. And that's what we're trying to do at the start. And so I think that's part of where, the movement, I guess you can call it, of folks talking about how, lean, the 4-letter word lean, is where, okay, we're not going to talk about lean anymore. You know what I mean? Because I think it's been around enough now where people hear lean and they go, okay, I had some sort of an experience with it, whether it was Last Planner or an executive came in and tried to push it on the whole company and just whatever. And so there's already preconceived notions of it. And I think at the core of it, whether we call it lean or we call it anything else, it's a benefit to everybody to actually follow the principles behind it and actually get people to learn and get better at what they're doing, because it ends with a better result. And I think, right now we're doing a lot of really good work in outreach and talking and everything else within the industry, not just at LCI, but everyone who does things on their own outside, this show among them, is getting people to kind of realize that is really it's for everyone. So when people go and say, oh, it's a manufacturing thing, it's like, it's not, right? You're looking at the surface level of it, it's manufacturing. It's the core of it is about learning. And so, everyone wants to learn, everyone wants to get better. That's the whole idea behind this, is we're trying to get all of us to work in a way that we're getting better all the time. So you don't have to consciously think, okay, well, I need to take a couple hours, or it's the end of the week now is my time to learn, right? It's kind of, it is,
or
we
worse,
do it on a
George.
regular basis.
Or you're on your own time, OT.
Yeah.
Your own time. You can't
Right.
learn at work. You got to learn on your own time, on
Exactly.
overtime, which is
Exactly.
I totally disagree with.
No, absolutely. I mean, we need to be learning while we're at work. It's, as scary as it might sound for some employers to think that, people are going to be quote unquote experimenting or trying new things at work to learn more, it benefits everybody. You mean is it gets the people who are doing the work better at it. It's going to benefit our employers because they're going to get a better product at the end of the day, whether it's they're working more efficiently so they spend less hours on something, or just the quality of the job comes out better, whatever it might be, they get a better quality product at the end of the day. And then same with the owners and designers and everyone else who's there too, is that, you're going to get better quality things. They're going to get done on time. They're going to get done the way that we're all kind of intending it to be. And I just don't think that, the industry as a whole spends enough time on that piece of it, is understanding that lean isn't just a 4-letter word. It's not a tool. It's a way of thinking. And I think if we kind of focus on thinking about developing ourselves while we're doing our work, I think that's kind of the key here. And so I know it's been a project, if you will, of mine, is that's what I'm trying to spread and get people to understand a little bit more, is that what the core of it is. And whether you're doing Last Planner or you're trying to use Scrum or you're trying to do anything, that's kind of at the core of what we're doing here, right? And so call it what you will, use whatever tools you want to. If at the core of it, like, you're getting better at what you're doing and we're getting better as a whole, then, as far as I'm concerned, we're at least making progress there.
I completely agree. And I absolutely love the fact that you mentioned my favorite word, Scrum. Thank you for that, George. It's a gift. Merry Christmas to me.
Absolutely. And I'm taking your Scrum Master course here this week. So yeah. I'm a member and signed up. So I'm on board there. I love it. I'm hoping to grab some great nuggets out of that and be able to apply it to some who don't know Scrum. So
you're in for a
treat on there too.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to you for feedback on the course afterwards, because I think your perspective is so diverse. It's going to be really cool to hear what you think about it. And I want to just unpack a couple of things in what you said there. A lot of people do have a bias against the word lean. Thank you, media in the United States, for making lean such a nasty word that George absolutely is correct in referring to it as the 4-letter word. Inside of large corporations and businesses and construction and even design firms, it is seen as a very negative thing, because people tend to associate lean with either the very surface level, just eliminating waste, which to a lot of people, without understanding what that even entails, looks like extra work. If I have to get rid of things, that just looks like extra work. But that's a very surface level understanding. The darker side, I would say that the media portrays lean, and we've seen a lot of things with the supply chain recently, messages against a just-in-time type of supply chain without any understanding of supermarket concepts or inventory buffers. People that just trying to make headlines and splash. They try to get us to believe that lean is an acronym that stands for less employees are needed, or doing more with less, which is absolutely not the case. John Krafsek and the team that coined the phrase way back in the day, they didn't want to call it the Toyota production system. They just didn't want to call it that. But it was a philosophy that at the time when they were studying it was just very hard to put some language on. And then later in the early 2000s, when people got together at Snowbird and created the Agile Manifesto, they also said, because lean was already negatively perceived in the media, that they didn't want to call it lean, even though the roots of the Agile Manifesto are deeply embedded in lean philosophy, concepts, and methodologies. So I think it's just fascinating that we don't like it, but it's the best, closest word there is. And I guess we didn't want to just call it learning or adaptation. So we couldn't be there, George. We couldn't go back in time, you and I, and tell people, like, probably no matter what they called it, there would be people being negative towards it because it looks like extra work from the onset if you're looking outside in, or if an executive forces it down your throat. I've seen a couple of recent articles on the Lean Builder. Jesse Hernandez just had a post, and he said his introduction to Lean was some executive saying, here, you have to do this extra stuff now. And that was his foray in, which luckily for him, that extra stuff actually built some more capacity for him, and he got interested and curious and more. But how many people do we know, George, that they don't have that luck of what gets forced upon them actually does benefit them? I'm sure you've heard some Last Planner story nightmares, and then I want to hear more about your take on Last Planner too. So I'm going to ask you like 7 questions, and you just pick which one you want to answer. But
No,
they're all
enough,
fascinating. Sure. Yeah. So
I'll just hit them all.
Yeah, because you said that to some, when you first are looking at Last Planner system, it doesn't appear to just be good conversation. It looks like a whole bunch of extra stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It does. And I think that's, listen, are there the jobs where they don't really do any planning at all? So technically speaking, it would be extra work. Sure. Right. But listen, if you're not doing any planning, then you should probably be doing planning anyway. So yes, let's add this on top of it. You need to plan, right? We'll put that there. But yeah, I think people look at it as extra work because so much in construction, the culture we've built is, well, we're not going to talk about this. You're just going to tell me what to do, and I'm going to go do it. So when we come to a room and we come and sit everyone down and say, okay, we're actually going to have a conversation about what should actually be happening here and what you want to be doing, because it just makes sense to ask the person who's the expert on it, what do you actually want to do with this? People look at it as extra, and because they're not used to it and they're not practiced in it. And so it does end up being that initial pull where you're trying to drag people along to say, listen, this isn't extra. Let's just come with me here. Come on the journey with me, and just just look at it. Be open to it, and let's do it. And once it starts to work, they're like, okay. And they start to see that, well, now that we're doing this and having these planning sessions on a weekly basis, and we're having, whether you're doing the sticky notes or you're using something like Touch Plan and going digital, is what, just having a more collaborative planning environment, is people start going, okay, well, I don't need to spend the 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week I used to spend on Sundays while I was watching the Patriots game to do my schedule for the week. It's like, yeah, I know. We all just did it in the regular meeting that we were doing every single week. Like, oh, okay. So it's not extra. It's actually less than what I was doing before. And I have people helping me. So you mean I'm spending less time to get more out of it? It's like, exactly. Right. And so, we're so visual and we're so tactile in construction all the time that we really need to let's see and experience it first to say, okay, you're right, that works. Okay, great. Now let me see a little bit more. It's, let me dip the toe in the water, feel that it's actually warm, and then let me start to go in the full way. And so I've had plenty of experiences with that people, I've had to sit them down and kind of say, okay, what's the reasoning here, and really get down into the why don't you want to do this kind of conversation, and then just get them to trust me enough to say, listen, I'll be there to help along the way. I'll facilitate it. You know what I mean? I get it that you don't know how to do this yet. So let's work along the way here. But just trust me that there's going to come a point where it's going to work. We're going to see some sort of benefit. And then you're going to say, oh, okay, you're right. I don't know why I did it any other way. And so there's a great example of it where I had a team and a superintendent who pretty much said that exactly that. Like, I don't want to do this. This is stupid, right? Is I've had at a different places, we tried to do pool planning before. It didn't freaking work, right? Is I don't want to sit down here and all this time with the foreman and bring them in. They need to be out there in the field, right? And so that energy kind of radiated for the whole team. And so, yeah, the foreman were saying the same thing. We're like, okay, great. So I sat him down and I said, listen, we're going to do this, right? Is that, the project exec says, hey, we really want to push and do this. It's going to be better for the client, right? What is it that you don't want to do, right? What is it that doesn't work? And his whole thing was that he's like, well, listen, I'm the superintendent. I'm supposed to be in charge of the job site. You know what I mean? So it's my plan. I want to be going out there and people are supposed to be following what I do and this and that. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, it can still be your plan, right? Like, listen, you built the master schedule and you have the overall vision on it. So when we're having these planning sessions, have that for a guide while you're sitting there looking at it. And so if something starts to go and the plan starts to change from what you had big picture, stop and say, hey guys, we have a milestone that we have to meet here. We still have to meet this milestone. What are we going to do? And so that was kind of the in-between that I was able to get him to actually sit down in the meeting. Fast forward to the end of that job, and it was about a 10.5-month job, I think it was, and it was a lab fit out we did for one of the local research facilities for one of the hospitals. He basically was like, I'm not doing this any other way. And he actually got up into that monthly superintendent's meeting and told the team, this was when we were rolling out, trying to do much more of a robust weekly work plan process. And, we were at the time rolling out touch plan kind of company wide. As he said, hey guys, this works, right? It's like, I didn't like it at the beginning. I didn't think it was going to work, but he's like, it takes time out of my days. He's like, I don't have to answer my phone every 10 minutes because the foremen are fine talking to each other. And then at the end of the day anyways, when we do our stand up, he's like, all that comes out in the wash when we figure it out. He's like, it works. He's like, believe me. He's like, I remember when I had the conversation originally with our COO and I was like, there's no way I'm doing this stuff. He's like, and then George came and he's like, I'm not doing this stuff. Let's go. He's like, now he's like, I'm not doing it any other way. And the next job that we won, because we were so successful on that one, we won a kind of a copycat of that on an upper floor in the building. We said, we're bringing all the same foremen. We're bringing the same job, the same crew. Let's just do it again. And we did it. And it was just as successful as the last one. And so that was kind of, I always like to talk about is that's kind of one of the crowning jewels, so to speak, of I can say, listen, this was a guy who was way over here who didn't want to do it at all. And by the end of it, he's like, I'm not doing it any other way. Just because I think it went so well. And he was able to see that it's not extra. It was actually, it's just new stuff that when you get used to it, it actually takes time away from what you would usually have to spend on it. But yeah.
Yes, and absolutely, George. Everyone listening, George has just given you another perfect nugget. Let me just unpack it a hair more so that people listening, if you missed the magic in what he just did and what he described, is that he had a skeptic. And everyone who knows me knows I love skeptics because they're thinking about risk and what can go wrong, or they have experiences and they know stuff has gone wrong. And George slowed down and had a one-on-one conversation with the superintendent to see what didn't work. And then they were able in a safe way to talk about it without losing any face in front of the other people or being diminished in any way. That is powerful, to give people the space to tell you why it can't work, and then to show, not tell, but to show what the process is going to be and that where are they in the process, right? Because the superintendent did not get eliminated from the equation.
No.
Right. And last planner system, you still need that superintendent to be that the center spoke of the wheel of all the value creators. For sure, they're coordinating. It's more than just a contractual thing. If you have a general contractor on board with trades, information does have to flow, and there is a benefit to having a central person on there leading the charge. So, superintendents, if you're out there, and I know that a lot of the superintendents listen to the show, George, they use Last Planner System in every single project. But if you're out there and you're thinking like, well, it might be too hard. I mean, now more than ever, there are so many free resources, good resources that you can see on what good last planner system look like, what it looks like. I recommend Joe and Keon's book, The Lean Builder, to see yet another example, right, George? You've read that book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great way to kind of ease your way into it and stick your toe in, like I was saying before.
Yeah.
Stick your toe in a little bit, change things gradually over time that I think are less scary, and then work your way up. But yeah, the way they lay that out, I think, is a great way to start to get into it.
Absolutely. And if you want to dip your toe, like super toe dip, like don't even get the base of your foot wet, no heel in the water. You can always just expose your milestones out with the superintendent and have dialogue with the trades on that flow at a high level. There's something magical, George, about taking it outside of bar charts and just exposing it either on a whiteboard or as diamonds and software in a program where people can move the stuff around easily without, a lot of rigmarole. The easier it is for people to expose their thinking and check that sequence, I think it really anchors people. If I can move something around, we had a job where an electrician brought to us in our master schedule that we forgot that there was a very critical transformer to the power generation yard that was going to cut the whole building loose for permanent power, that had to come out of a different sequence just because of a door. I mean, no one had thought about that. No one had thought like, oh, this door is going to become an issue. And so, I mean, that if we had not had that milestone conversation, we would have missed that, and it would have cost money that, unfortunately, we would have had to pay for. So that electrician saved our bacon, and also got us to move up earlier permanent power, which is nice. It's very nice to have permanent power in a building. It's a nice luxury.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You kind of need that for things.
You kind of need it. Yeah. Keep the lights on.
Yeah. I will say the one more thing I do want to add with the last planner, and I think it was a conversation I was having with, I know Hal Maycomer, and when we were kind of preparing for the course we taught at LCI, which was an Intro to TAC Planning, one of the 4-hour courses there, workshops. But we were talking about, he was incorporating in kind of why lean and lean ideals have kind of caught on to other industries and what they're doing differently than us. And one of the biggest things that we were talking about is that whether it's manufacturing or whether it's healthcare and their healthcare operations or any of the other industries that you look at, they engage the frontline people to actually improve the system that they're working in, right? In construction, unless you're doing last planner, right, there's no way for the men and women who are in the front lines actually doing the work to come and give feedback to improve the process that we're doing. And so, that's where I think such a big opportunity is for us, is just getting the feedback and engaging them and saying, hey, what can we do to make this better? Right. And there's the whole horizon of different things what that looks like, whether it's last planner or whether the trades themselves are doing 5S out on the job site on their thing. You know what I mean? Something along those lines. There's so many things they can do, but we just don't engage the workers and the people actually doing the work. And when you kind of step back and look at it and think, it's like, that is the only thing that makes sense. You know what I mean? Is they're the ones who are actually doing the work. Why wouldn't they know how to improve it better? And they're also probably going to give you an improvement that isn't going to cost a huge amount of money to implement, because they're not going to want to change a whole bunch of stuff they're doing, but they're going to want to do something that's going to make it better for them to do the work. So they're going to say, hey, well, maybe if we went instead, we organized our job cart a little bit differently here. Great. It makes it easier for them. What costs you $10-20 to get some dividers and different boxes for the cart. There you go. And so I think that's one of the things that we do a terrible job of, is engaging the men and women who are actually doing the work. And we have such of this top-down mentality that all the innovation and all the ideas are going to come from the people in the leadership roles and kind of trickle down. And if we just look at the industries who have been successful in implementing lean and this kind of learning ideal, that's what they do is one of the big things, is they engage the people who are actually doing the work.
Absolutely. And companies like Toyota, where they create an environment where employees are giving 2+ improvement ideas a day. I mean, could you imagine how cool if I was on a job site and if I was a 1,000-person job site and everybody gave 2 ideas, every day, I'd have 2,000 ideas a day. How would I even deal with that? Like in construction, that seems
Right.
so foreign. Could you imagine that problem, George?
No, I know. I mean, even it's still the idea of having that much is still kind of foreign to me too, because I haven't had the chance yet to go on an actual tour of a Toyota plant or anything like that, but I'd love to because I want to see what that looks like. And I think it's, we also have this idea of an improvement as, hey, I'm going to change something completely where that might not be the improvement. It might just be hey, we've moved this box from here to here because it's a shorter reach for my hand, right? It's something, to the Paul Akers of the 2-second lean, it's something that quick, but that's an improvement, right? So that's one of the things that we put in for the day. And that's the other thing is that we have this perception that the improvements have to be these huge astronomical things, and they don't. It's something that improves anything at all. Change it. Is it better than it was before? Great, that's an improvement. But yeah, I want to see that.
Empowering the people first. Like when you go visit Toyota or you read these stories and these incredible numbers, or like even Paul Akers and what he's got going at his shop at FastCap with all the improvements, all the foundation that happens on is creating that environment where you ask people for their ideas. Most of the time I've heard people say, well, no one's ever asked me. We were on a job, I was on a solar job earlier this year, and we were just looking at some inspection thing, and I was being my usual self, asking with curiosity and just to understand like what's going on. And the people comment to me like, this guy is 22 years a laborer in construction. And he said in 22 years, I was the first person from management to ask him a question. And I thought, wow, it's like we're like I just opened a time capsule and stepped into construction, 1950 something.
Yep.
So like, if you're on a job listening to the show, go ahead and hit pause and go get curious about something in the field and ask people questions, not to show like you're a smarty pants, but with actual curiosity, and hear from them, why they do the things a certain way, how things are organized. And then as people talk out loud, expose their thinking, an innovation will emerge. And encourage those people. If you're in a management position, encourage your people to go ahead and make little improvements to benefit them. Benefit them first. That's why it's called the EBFC show, George. The first thing we want to do is make it easier for our people.
Absolutely. And if it's easier for them, that means that they're going to be doing better work on top of it. So from a management perspective, it's a win-win.
Win-win.
Right? It's win-win for everyone. You're going to get better and more happy people doing the work. They're going to put out better quality stuff. It's going to be faster. It's going to be quicker. Great. Right? Where do you go wrong on that? So
that's right.
Yeah.
It's like, and people that don't know, like George and I have hung out past midnight. We were at LCI, which is that's my typical jam where I go to hang out with cool people like George. And we were chatting over a couple of adult beverages at whatever the third bar I think we went to. Maybe the second.
Whatever that one was. It might have been the Irish bar. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
There's always an Irish pub in every town. Thank you, Ireland, for exporting just good culture making, locations for us worldwide.
Exactly.
In every major city, George, there's an Irish pub.
Yeah. And I'm up in Boston, which means there's probably the only place that has more Irish pubs per capita is Ireland itself, is probably the way that it is. But
that is probably true. I remember somebody from Ireland had a friend that went to go visit Dublin, and they called their friend that didn't even live in Ireland anymore, and they said, "Hey, I'm in Dublin. What pub should I go to?" And the person said, "Okay, you at your hotel?" And they're like, "Yes." And it's like, "Go outside, turn left. First pub you walk into is going to be perfect." And they were like, "How did you know there was a pub there?" It's Dublin. There's pubs on every street.
Dublin. Yeah, there's going to be one there. It's like we were just talking about Dunkin' Donuts. It's like Dunkin' Donuts here in New England. It's like you turn left, there's going to be a Dunkin' Donuts. It's pubs in Ireland.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I wanted to also ask you, George, let's piggyback on this capability development. Is there ever, from your perspective, a time where improving your work wouldn't have benefits for you? Because some people actually come at their work, and especially in subject matter experts, there could be a tendency towards thinking that you're it, like you're at the top of the pyramid, top of the mountain. When does it end, George?
I don't think it does. I mean, I think it's, I think when we get complacent, it's when, if you want to call it competition or whatever else catches up to us. It's, and again, it doesn't mean that we stop and we have to keep doing these monumental innovations, but I don't think it stops in looking at what we're doing and understanding what's going to make it better. And if you want to call them experiments, if you want to call them tweaks, whatever you want to refer to them as, but take a look at what you're doing and saying, okay, well, what happens if I changed this piece of my process or the way that I do it? And change it and see what happens. Maybe it does go worse. And then you go back to it and say, okay, well, that didn't work, but that's valuable, right? That's valuable to know that, well, that doesn't help it. But what's the other options? And just kind of keep going through. And I think that we do kind of get complacent sometimes. We're like, oh, we're at the top of the world here. Why do I need to keep pushing? Why do I need to keep getting better? But it's through that, continually trying to get better at things that we bring everything forward. You know what I mean? Is I think if we stopped and said, hey, we built an airplane, right? Is like, there's literally a way that humans can fly in the air. What else do we need to do now? You mean is we would stop there, right? And now look at us all these years later of what airplanes and flying can do. So, I don't think that there's ever a time where we need to stop. I mean, I think probably on a personal level, there's times where people will feel that like, okay, maybe they're burnt out or maybe they don't want to push any farther, and so be it. And there's that whole, personal aspect of it too. But I just think we can't get complacent in what we're doing, because I think that the second we get complacent is when problems are going to start to happen and we stop moving forward kind of as a society with everything that we're doing. So yeah.
Perfect.
Kind of my shorter answer on that.
Yeah, that was a longer answer. But I think it's a good point. Like, people that come onto the show and share their experiences, we've got people from across the supply chain. And now, George, I think you're in the top 5 technology companies that have come on the show and shared your experiences. Like, competitors to be sharing. Competition is actually good. There is a level of healthy competition. I want to go back to one of the things Dr. Deming said. Dr. Deming has been, William Edwards Deming, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, was an amazing pioneer in quality and also foundationally set a lot of the things that we now call lean, that even people in Japan learned after World War II, was through a lot of the work that he had done here in the United States and abroad. And he was epically larger than life, even abroad. More so than in the U.S., but he'd had a fantastic career. But one of the things I remember, there was a talk that he was giving I was lucky enough to watch a recording of it, and it was nothing but executives. There's probably over 300 executives in the audience, nothing but CEOs, CFOs, COOs, executive vice presidents. This is the talk that he was giving in one of his seminars. And he was talking about that learning and capability development, and then this idea of complacency, the very thing you're talking about. And one of the executives was like very skeptical, raised their hand and said, so if one of my people at my company, I think they were like a manufacturing company in the United States, if one of my people wants to learn about biology, am I supposed to encourage that? Like, they wanted him to say, no, it has nothing to do with what you're doing. And his answer was, absolutely. He said, you absolutely encourage your people to learn anything at any time. He's like, you cannot predict what they learn, how it will benefit them and you as a result of them improving themselves or learning something new. He said, you have no idea. And I remember what Jeff Sutherland said when he was studying, how great teams work, and looking at how to make things better. And it was actually his study of cellular biology, where he learned how complex systems work, and people working on projects together form a complex system. And you've got to have feedback loops, and you've got to have communication pathways, and you have to have ways to see what's happening. And And there are different ways to create that environment. It's one of the things that Scrum does. And so a lot of like why Scrum works so gosh darn good, and why Last Planner System works so well, because it's borrowed a lot from Scrum, by the way. I think people have heard me say that before. In case this is your first show, Last Planner System is borrowed heavily from Scrum. You have to just be open. You might learn something in a completely different domain that benefits you. And that's available to all of us. And competition is good. If you talk to your competitors about what they're doing, you might get inspired. You shouldn't compare yourself to beat yourself up. That's not positive for you. But you can absolutely be inspired to see there are other ways, and you can get better every day, as George has so beautifully pointed out to us. Thank you, George, for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to give you another, since you're dropping all these nuggets, George, as you've transitioned in your career a bit and you've changed and occupied different roles. Is there anything that surprised you? Like, what has surprised you, Mr. Hunt, working at a software company in construction?
I think that the problems that I was facing on a regular basis do not just live within the company I was at. And yes, so those who go to LCI know that, right? There's presentations and things, and you talk with all the like-minded people, and you realize that you're not alone. But I'm talking even now more so on a global scale. Excuse me. I've had a chance to talk to companies and customers all over the world, and just to hear them talking about what they're going through, it's like, so you're in Australia and you're doing construction that's completely different than what I'm doing, and completely different trades and different training and all that. And yet the problem is still exactly the same. It still comes down to the fact that people still aren't communicating very well, or or something like that. And it's just like, wow, okay. So I think it's just the surprising thing to me, and not that I never had the idea that, our problems went larger than ourselves, but just the view that I get to have in this position where I'm talking to so many people from so many different walks of life in so many different areas of the world, that it really kind of brings everything in full perspective together to say, like, when we talk about learning and improving it from an industry perspective, it really is the entire industry. It's not just we're doing it just for the industry in the US, or, over in Europe, they're doing things and just improving the construction industry in Europe. Is, especially now with the internet and all the conferences and things we have, is that knowledge needs to get shared, because it's the same problems we have all over the world. You know what I mean? Whether it's labor, whether it's materials and supply chains and all these things that keep coming up, with safety and everything else that people look at, it's the same problems across the world, right? As every company goes through with it. And there's the companies who we'll call the superstars, who are very good at certain things, but they're still, the reason why they're up there and very good at what they're at is because they look at everything else in the industry and learn from it. And so, that's, I think, been the biggest eye-opening thing to me. It's just that the realization that I think that I had the idea in my head anyways, but the kind of confirmation of these problems are systematic, and they go out across the world to everywhere that we're doing construction. And it's not just the US, and it's not just Europe or South America or wherever we're talking about, is they are all over the place, because we're all still people and we all still do the same stuff. You know what I mean? And so the work and the improvements that we're doing now, in our own silos, if you will, on our projects, is sharing that as much as we can is going to help everybody, because it, just like I said, it goes and it's prevalent across the entire world with how people do construction.
Yes, absolutely is. I had the same epiphany as I did some work in Ireland, and then I've had some connections in different parts of the world, and people, Malaysia, Singapore, Turkey, Australia, even more non-English speaking. I was shocked to hear exactly what you said, George. Same exact problems. It doesn't matter the type of trade, the sophistication level, there are just some common, I would say, like there's some archetypal problems that are just so prevalent, like the communication aspect. I remember an executive telling me that we were talking about some challenges on a job, a very large job. And he said, I know what you're going to say. And I said, what? He's like, it's a communication problem. It always is. I said, well, if it always is, and you've been doing this for 30 years, don't you have like some things that we can try or that we can take action on to mitigate this? Because we've been on projects that are successful and we've been on projects that aren't. What's the difference? It's just getting people to not just throw their hands up and say, well, it's this thing, and then blame something or someone, but to actually do like yours is suggesting, share those improvements. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just get better wheels and make them faster. Or maybe, like you said, George, we don't need wheels at all. We just fly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think so, and I think it's, actually, I think it was Deming who said when we're looking for problems, if we're going to blame the people instead of the system that they're working in, and you think that it's the people's fault and not the system, take another look, because it's not the people, it's the system. So, the way that we work and the way that we do things that's always the problem. It's not the people. The people are just doing what the system is designed to do. They're working within the system. So if we can change the way that we work and the way that we're thinking and having a better environment for people, I think that's what we're striving for, right?
Right.
Yeah, ultimately.
Awesome. George, you get the last word, and then I'm shutting this thing down.
Perfect. Last word. Well, I mean, I think...
Or last phrase. You could get the last phrase. You get the last paragraph, George.
Oh, boy. There we go. I think just to close it out for me is, I think, the work that everyone's doing out there right now, I think keep up with it, keep sharing, keep telling people about what you're doing, whether it's at LCI, whether it's at IGLC things. I know there's so many things now throughout the world that are doing the same kinds of things that LCI is doing here in the United States. So keep going to these. If you're curious, go to them to learn more, and just, don't stop. I think it is really the thing. It's just don't stop trying to get better at what you're doing on a daily basis, because while at first it might seem that it's a little bit of an uphill battle to kind of work in and know how do I improve something, we need to get better at it. The more you're practiced at continually looking at your work and trying to improve it, the better you get and the less of a burden it seems like. And so it's kind of getting over that initial hurdle and kind of ripping off the Band-Aid, so to speak. So that's what I'd say and leave people with is keep going, keep trying to improve. And if you're curious about something, is reach out and ask people, because that's the only way we learn. So,
George, value has been delivered. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and thank you for inspiring so many more people to share. Take that risk of learning. It's only going to be fun. Let's go do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fun. That's the key part. Thanks so much, Felipe.
Very special thanks to my guest. I'm Felipe Engineer Manriquez. The EBFC show is created by Felipe and produced by a passion to build easier and better. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. Let's go build.